use this as experience in knowing how to keep his next job because.
It was funny to watch people go through their refrigerator. I'm like,
Holy cow, it's gonna be so hard.
Yeah, I don't feel good. I go, look, you can do whatever you want. What I do if you're going home is nothing.
Okay, what is the story with the bathroom downstairs again?
Well, if you, why is there a problem?
Now there is, because we didn't have a sign or anything. I went to use the bathroom. I thought it was weird that the toilet was off.
What?
The men's bathroom, the water line was off. Did you know that?
Water line to the bathroom was off?
To the
The
toilet.
toilet was off?
Yeah. So that's what I was trying to figure out, why the water line meant anything. I turned the water line on because I was here last night dealing with tables and stuff. I used the restroom and I could tell that it drained the water out of the tank and then it didn't fill back up. I didn't think much more about it.
Okay.
So I just went downstairs, realized that the water line was off, turned the water line on, it filled up the tank, and then water started, maybe it was more irony than anything, but water instantly started draining out of that drain pipe.
Underneath the sink?
Yep.
Yeah, the lady, had you guys just ran a bunch of water down the sink?
now?
Just, yeah,
I mean, it was probably just ironic, the timing was.
because that toilet in that sink should not be.
That's what I was gonna say, that shouldn't be linked at all, that goes down the floor.
But it will, if you run water down the kitchen sink right now, a large amount, fast, it will still leak underneath that little sink in the men's bathroom. Because there are some little pinholes right down by the floor. And he put a seal in there and everything, but that's not gonna get those pinholes. What happens is, who all was it looked at it with me Thursday night? Was that you?
It was me.
Yeah, there's a big line coming over there, feeds into a smaller line.
Right.
Well, that smaller line can't handle everything that big line brings it. And so it backs up in there, and then those little pinholes start to leak. And that,
Well, I just wanna make sure, I'm like, that shouldn't have anything to do with me turning on the water to fill the toilet. It was
no,
just
I don't
ironic
think that would
timing.
be coincidence.
Okay.
Because, and I don't know what they'll come up with. I mean,
I don't know, are they gonna have, it almost looked like it was coming out all the way down the floor.
it is, it's right down above, just barely above the floor.
So, I mean, we could
And
have to
it's
dig
little
into the
pinholes
floor.
in that pipe that are seeping out.
Wonder
we
when
may
that
have-
happened all of a sudden.
Well,
It hasn't been all this, and it's just that it's getting worse. So I don't know if the pipes are getting
Well, I didn't,
clogged or what.
well, I didn't know if any of the people we've had come work on it did something with that pipe.
well, I think that there was a clog between the sink, kitchen sink,
Right.
and that sink. He got that, which then opened things up for it to flow real quick across from the kitchen sink.
Okay.
So that's gonna make it worse. It's gonna make it easier for that to happen, but before that clog would hold things back up here at the kitchen sink,
Right.
and it would slowly come across and it wouldn't do that so much. But, so now,
I don't know.
If
If
they
it-
could
if
come up-
that's happening down the floor though, it's gonna be.
yeah, we may end up cutting out the floor there of that sink. And who knows what the pipe looks like.
Are you guys cold too?
Yeah.
I've been freezing all morning and I didn't know if it was
But it's
just,
all right. I mean, we're okay.
I'm just
Matt.
well, I was
Caroline, don't
confused
turn it up this way.
because it's the same temperature, it's always on, but I told Rachel this morning, I'm like, I'm freezing.
I'm
I've had my.
I would turn it up just for another hour.
I'm very
How you doing?
Okay.
Really?
Alright.
We'll cuddle.
That's what I was doing with Rachel during. I'm like, I'm freezing, a little warm.
It's not unusual for me.
Okay, my plan is for this to be faster than last week. We had a lot of participation last week, which, or last time, a couple weeks ago. Did anyone have any, because a lot of people had questions, did anyone have any final questions or comments about vehicle leases?
Well, if we ever do, we're coming back to you.
Okay. I mean, mainly what I try to demonstrate is like anything, if it's done wrong, you're not gonna have a good experience, but there are some pretty interesting benefits to it. I mean, just imagine a longer term loan with a stopping point in the middle where you can decide what you want to do. Typically, that's only going to fit in really on a new vehicle. I mean, if you're wanting a brand new vehicle, but mathematically, like I said, if you truly have the self-discipline to buy a new vehicle and drive it for up to that 10-year period, then you're doing okay. But at a dealership, it amazed me just how many people, man, they can't stand it. When that new car smell wears off after 2 or 3 years, they're back on that lot, and it was just a never-ending frustration for everybody because they hadn't caught up to the depreciation yet. The depreciation had outpaced them, but they wanted a new car, and they didn't want to be told that, what do you mean I have to pay $3,000 in negative equity? And a lease fixed that in a lot of ways. I mean, with a lease, you in theory can never have negative equity. You can go over on your miles and have to pay it, but you won't have negative equity. So,
Yes, so, and I think you actually answered this last week. If you do a lease, let's say you figure 20,000 miles a year, it's $60,000, you only do 40,000. There isn't a rebate, there isn't.
it's not necessarily a refund. It's just the idea is that since you have used less of that vehicle, it could potentially book more than the residual value you're responsible for when you go in. So let's say I have a vehicle, I do a 20,000 mile lease. They tell me, okay, when you pull back in here in 3 years, that is going to be worth 50% of the value. So at that time, you can either turn it in, you could try to sell it or trade it, but if the value is similar, you can just turn it in. Well, let's say I only drive 5,000 miles a year and it sits on perfect concrete and garage for whatever reason. Well, in 3 years, they have estimated me using 60,000 miles of that vehicle. I've used 20. So the whole idea is that's the time where you could potentially sell it or trade it in for a higher value and then pay off the residual. So if they calculated that 50%, but you could sell it for this much, you can sell it and pay this off and you keep the profit.
But if you just turn it back in.
If you turn it back in, you lose it. And that was what Brian did, which about made me sick. I mean, and they got that Jeep Liberty, and that was when they had the restaurant. Karen never, I mean, you're talking about what, 3 blocks is all that thing drove back and forth. We had calculated a certain level of mileage. They had driven way less than that. Well, the way I understand it is he showed up at the dealership, handed him the keys, and left. And I mean, if he would have inquired about trading it in, or if he would have looked at selling it online or selling it to a dealer, I mean, he could have got rid of the vehicle and walked away with a few $1,000 possibly. I mean, Jeep Liberty wasn't an extravagant vehicle in the first place, but yeah, I mean, if you use less of the vehicle than you've calculated, you potentially can gain. And that's where the mileage thing goes the other way too. That's where so many people have been upset before, is because the dumb salesman or dealership who just wants to sell a car makes the lowest mileage and the person uses more of the vehicle. So now they have shot past that calculation. So they have to pay for more of the vehicle than they've been paying for. And that's where people have had a pretty bad taste in their mouths.
How do you avoid dumb salesmen?
Huh?
How do you avoid dumb salesmen? Like if I
Talk
walk
to
in
someone
there,
like me who knows what the,
Educate yourself.
yeah,
Never
I think if
trust
you're familiar, I mean, I don't want to encourage pessimism because, like I said, a lot of times, I mean, I was trying to conduct myself with integrity and honesty, and there were times where customers were just devious because they had a trade-in vehicle and they would go from dealership to dealership and try to pit them against each other and see who would do what. I mean, I had one customer one time that he went as far because, I mean, negotiation isn't fun. I mean, a common negotiation approach, though, I mean, I would flat out say, if we can come to an agreement, are you going to buy the car? I mean, otherwise, we're just wasting time. I mean, I'm commissioned. You're not getting paid for this. Are you going to buy the car? I had one customer one time. He was a pretty arrogant guy, probably about 30 years old or something. He went as far, he signed the agreement to buy the car that day. And then whenever it got time to deliver, he called in and canceled and said, I'm not. Well, he put down earnest money. He put down money for us to hold the car. I think it was like $500 or $1,000. something like that, to go towards his purchase. Well, what's interesting is as a Chrysler dealership, we get reports of every vehicle sold at every Chrysler dealership in the area. And my boss called me in a few weeks later, and he's like, look, this guy bought it the same day down the road. He took the price we were going to give him for his trade and used it to make them give a higher price and bought it. And I was like, well, whatever. A month after that, I get a call from this nice, jovial, easygoing guy. Hey, do you remember me? You know, we didn't end up buying a vehicle. We decided to keep what we were, you know, what we had. And I just wanted to see if there'd be a way to get that earnest money back since it didn't work out. And I was like, you know, we get reports, you big dummy. I don't know what to tell you. You signed an agreement. You put down earnest money. You didn't fulfill the agreement. We're keeping your money. I mean, so in the end, that was one of those situations where someone tried so hard to not get ripped off that they ripped themselves off. I mean, they didn't win. So I don't want to necessarily encourage, do not look up online 10 things to not do in front of a car salesman. I mean, that's you know, conduct yourself as a Christian with integrity, but ask questions and educate yourself on the process. You know, I mean, just what we went over last week, you should never, ever end up with a lease for 10,000 miles a year if you're driving 30. Just, I mean, that's really the key. As long as you don't do that, you should be in good shape. There's not really any other way that they're going to try to do anything bad to you. It's really just the structure of the contract, if that's not done correctly. But again, a lot of that comes down to gripey customers saying, I want a low payment. I want a low, you know, I mean, they don't want that 30,000 mile payment. They want a 10,000 mile. And I know there's been times before where the salesman has done their job and said, listen, if you want this, you can have it, but you're going to get to the end and owe a bunch of money for extra mileage. And of course, the customer forgets that 3 years later, you know, but just be educated on the way the process works. And I mean, I dealt with a decent amount of salespeople. I never dealt with, I mean, I worked at a big dealership in Newcastle. We never did anything dishonest. I mean, they're not trying to rip you off. It cracks me up. Every used car dealer in this town is so opposite of the stereotype of used car dealers. Tom Clark, Ted Hunter are about the most laid back, easygoing guy. I mean, Tim Schnelly kind of looks like a car salesman.
Tim Hunter
He's
is a little persistent, I can tell you that.
Ted Hunter. Well, and I'm not. I mean, they'll be persistent, but I just mean they're not.
Yeah, I'm not
They're
saying
not in a cheap suit, you know, trying to trick you into getting a car. I mean, they're just. You know, Tim Schnelly. His hair's all slicked back, but I mean, they're all. I mean, they have no. You know. It's one of those things, consumers have made car salesmen what they are. I mean, I think I asked a question to my boss one time. I'm like, what idiot in this industry started negotiating? You don't negotiate at Walmart.
Actually, I know that.
The package, oh, well, I had one or two people. But the pack of gum's $1. No one questions that and says, I'll buy it today if you give it to me for 80 cents. I mean, at some point in the car industry, some moron started allowing that. And I don't agree with, I mean, I just leased that truck and I am perfectly happy. And my sales, I mean, I could have said, oh, you're going to give me a couple $1,000s off the price. I mean, I don't agree with that. I mean, that's the price.
You can't walk in and to, well, like yesterday, I had a lady come for a puppy and it was priced $550. She walks in, we do all the paperwork. She hands me the money. She only has me $500 and she's going to walk out with the puppy.
Right.
It's like going, she's $550. Well, I only have $500. She's trying to walk out the door with the puppy. It's like, no, she's $550.
And guys,
It's
that,
like going,
I think that's an,
I made the daughter stay with me and the puppy and the mom go get
Right.
the money. That's okay.
I mean, that's where as Christians, I think we need to consider every part of the situation. I mean, dealing with financial stuff and business stuff in the society we live in, I'm just telling you, you will have a difficult time demonstrating a Christ-like character and actually having joy that we're supposed to have as Christians if you walk around life being afraid of getting ripped off. It's just not, I mean, the first car I ever sold when I was up there was a Dodge Stratus. It was the most plain car imaginable. an older couple came in, traded in a vehicle, and I made I think I told you guys, there were times on a $50,000 truck, I made a $75 commission. On that car, I made a $450 commission. Just because they didn't try to beat the tar out of us. We said, here's the numbers, and they said, okay. And I made money, and they drove away happy and got their new car, and the payment was affordable and everything. I mean, you know, I think we need to be shrewd and aware as Christians, but I mean, I think I told you, I've said before, of all the customers I dealt with at the dealership, the most underhanded, devious, what's the word I'm looking for? Paranoid customers I dealt with were preachers. Every single time.
I'm telling you.
And all the other,
Somebody I hate to really use it for,
Yep.
one of the preachers. I've had 3 or 4
Yep.
over the years, and I hate.
and all the other salesmen, I mean, that was common knowledge.
They all
It's like
say
if a
they
preacher
expect to be
walks in
treated
here,
special.
I mean, that is horrible. That is the type of hypocrisy that Christ condemned. I mean, that is not the way it should be. That's ridiculous. So, I mean, that's my encouragement, I guess, as a Christian is, in most of those situations, those guys aren't trying to rip anyone off. They're just trying to make a living at a decent amount. I mean, I told the story of the guy that drove away in a $36,000 Jeep Commander feeling like I ripped him off, and I didn't even really get paid. I mean, I didn't get paid. He absolutely cut the throat of the dealership and drove away unhappy, and no one was happy, you know? So, to answer your question, I'd just be educated on the process. And if you got questions, that's why I'm doing class like that. I think as Christians, we all have experience in various areas and should use each other as a resource. A lot of times we don't do that in the financial realm. We all sit here and make mistakes ourselves and figure it out the hard way. And usually financial mistakes are the most unforgiving mistakes in our society. If you mess this, you know, if you buy a car and mess it up, I mean, that's a big deal. You could deal with that for years and years and years if you get a vehicle lease and it's not the appropriate mileage or whatever.
I learned a lot about leases from your lesson last week, but the main thing I learned was at the end of the lesson. I said how the value of buying a car that's 3 years old,
Mhm.
low mileage, good condition, driving it for
That's-
5 to 7 years.
That will always
That
be.
makes sense.
Well, and I wanted to throw that in there because I wanted to explain leases and how they work, but make no mistake, nothing involving a brand new car will technically be the lowest cost way to drive a vehicle. It just won't. I mean, you'll get benefits to that, you know, I mean, as far as warranty and things, but if you go to Consumer Reports, the cheapest way to buy a vehicle is buy a vehicle 3 to 5 years old, drive it for 5 to 7 years. I mean, at that point, the balance of buying it after the depreciation, but selling it before it starts to nickel and dime you is the lowest cost. I mean, if for someone who's looking for lowest cost. All right, if you recall, the section that we're in is I wanted to hit on a couple specific financial products that a lot of people encounter. I think this is going to be the last one. We looked at credit cards, we looked at vehicle leases, and I wanted to look at home equity products. If you walk into your bank, you don't have to walk into your bank too many times. They're going to be asking you about a home equity product. That is something that in the banking system, home equity products are usually conducted and processed in the branches, while a traditional mortgage is a specialized product handled by someone that's maybe in a back office. So, especially in corporate banks like U.S. Bank, Citibank, Chase Bank, PNC, Fifth Third, you know, a huge part of their grading, their growth, their measurement, all that stuff is home equity products. So, I mean, there's a lot of conversation that takes place, and I wanted to talk a little bit about that. First of all, some common misconceptions about home equity products is they are worse than credit cards because they put your house at risk. This drove me nuts. I would have customers that had their house paid off and would have $40,000 in credit card debt. And they were under the misconception, they literally would tell me, well, if I have to default on these credit cards, at least I keep my house. And I'm like, no, you don't. I mean, you tell me, let's pretend you're the credit card company and someone owes you 20 grand. And they just say, sorry, I'm not paying it. And you know they have 100 grand sitting over in a savings account. Are you going to let them get away with that? No, that's not the way it works. If you actually defaulted on $40,000 of credit card debt and had $150,000 of home equity, you're going to be sued for that equity. That's the way it's going to be. But some people thought that way. I mean, I think part of it is the American dream thing, that when my house is paid off, it is my house. Well, it is. It's an asset, but that asset in the grand scope of things can offset your liabilities should you not pay them. Okay? So I don't think anyone has that idea. That home equity is not immune to default situations, I guess is what I'm saying. Now, we won't talk about bankruptcy. If someone filed bankruptcy, there are certain minimums that you're allowed to keep of things. But in the scenario I just gave, you cannot default on a bunch of credit card debt with a paid off house and hope to keep your house. Okay. They can only be a second position mortgage. I'll kind of talk about this a little bit. You can have multiple loans on a piece of real estate, but they are in a specific position. And what that means is if a default were to happen, the first position loan must be satisfied from the sale of the property first. Okay? Then it moves on to the second position loan. So whenever you have multiple loans on a house, that's usually why loans in the first position are at much better terms than the loan in the second position, because that bank in the second position is at a greater risk. If you have a $100,000 house and you have a first mortgage of 60 and you have a second loan of 20, and you destroy your house and the bank gets it back and it auctions for 50,000, all that 50 goes to the first bank. The second bank gets nothing. Okay, so that position. Well, some people, their knowledge of home equity products is it can only be a second position loan. It's something that I do if I need a second mortgage for some reason. That's not the case. Okay, home equity products can be the only loan on your house. And again, as I get into this a little bit, it'll make a little more sense. Sure, but I have that all the time. I mean, when I start getting into these details, it sounds really, 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 really good. I mean, it sounds like an unbelievable product. And I would have customers in the banking field, because of course everyone's afraid to get ripped off. What am I missing here? Why is this so good? And I would say, I know it looks too good to be true, but it literally, I mean, at the day of closing, I will go over all the paperwork with you. I will show you that there's no fees. I will show you that there's no closing costs. I'll show you all the stuff. I'll show you your interest rate. In some cases, they look that way, but it's an extremely attractive product and an extremely effective product because it's using one of the greatest pieces of collateral you can have, which is equity. Okay, it's a lot harder for you to, take your home somewhere and hide it from the bank than it is a car, or than it is stuff, or than it is a piece of equipment, or whatever the case may be. Okay, cattle, any of that stuff is more movable usually than a piece of real estate. Okay, so with that, because it's such a solid piece of collateral, loans using that collateral are very, very attractive terms.
Matthew, I have a question.
Yep.
When you were helping me with the reverse mortgage, Dad's reverse mortgage, and you were at the bank and you came up with 2 other types of loans that you thought may work as well as the reverse mortgage, and you said you couldn't even touch what the reverse mortgage would do, but were those loans that you came up with the home equity?
They were home equity
loans,
products. Yeah.
But you have to immediately start paying.
That was the main kicker,
Okay.
which maybe at some point I'll do a little blip on reverse mortgages if people have questions, because reverse mortgages are a very unique product. But the huge difference is that almost any type of loan anyone is familiar with, you get the money up front, you start paying. The reverse mortgage is very unique in that the bank is essentially saying, we will give you this money today as long as you understand that when the owner passes away, the house is ours. So there's no payments. It pretty much allows someone to give up the equity in their home and use it as cash without losing the possession or the use of their home. But yes, home equity is what I was looking at. The big kicker there, though, was in that situation is there would have been payments. People kind of along with the idea that it's too good to be true, they're like, there has to be hidden fees and charges. There has to be something, you know. And in many cases in home equity products, there's not. There's nothing hidden. There's nothing there. It's a pretty basic product. Lasted longer this time. You're 3, you're gonna have to start behaving just maybe. All right, so here's how they work. Home equity loans, okay, I want to clarify, we are talking about home equity loans right now. We're kind of talking about 2 different products today, home equity loans and home equity lines of credit. So at this moment, we're talking about home equity loans. They are very similar to a traditional mortgage, okay, with some key differences. First of all, $0 or lower of upfront cost, but with a higher interest rate, okay? The big difference between traditional mortgages and home equity loans, for a traditional mortgage, you will pay more in cost, but usually result in a lower interest rate. For home equity loans, you will pay less to nothing in cost, but your interest rate will be a little higher. And what was unique about this during the recession is that gap got to almost nothing. That's why my branch in Little Connorsville, Indiana, we had the highest, essentially, home equity loan percentage growth of any branch in our company, because we were just doing them nonstop. I mean, we were, in a way, we weren't sending referrals onto our mortgage department because we could do the loans at the same interest rate because that gap closed. But most of the time, it's kind of like this. You know, you may get a traditional mortgage, pay $2,500 in closing costs, and get 4%. You may do a home equity loan and pay nothing in costs, but be at 5% or 5.5%. That's one key difference. So it's kind of an interchange between cost up front compared to costs over the term of the loan. Typically, the max LTV is 90%. That means whenever the bank appraises your house, on home equity products, they are only going to go up to 90%, and that is all about risk assessment for the bank. Traditional mortgages are, I mean, to this day, you can still sometimes find a traditional mortgage that would go up to 97% of the appraisal. So that means that on a purchase, your down payment is 3% on top of closing costs. But home equity products normally play that a little safer. They are a max 90%. More commonly, they're around 80% in that value. The max term is usually 20 years on a home equity installment loan. With traditional mortgages, you can do 30. Okay, so and a lot of this stuff plays into, part of the reason I'm showing this is because the last part of the whole debt section of this class will talk about strategic use of debt, paying down of debt, consolidation of debt, and this is a key tool to making that happen. But some of these details make a big difference. You know, 90%, 20 years, because a balance spread out over 20 years is going to have a higher payment than a balance spread out over 30. Okay. It can be in a second position on a house. What everyone here, I'm not going to get into the details, but a traditional mortgage where you go through a mortgage officer, you spend 4 months of your life wanting to blow your head off. that is, and that's the way it is all everywhere now. I don't know if anyone's bought a house in the last 5-6 years or so, but that always is going to be a first position loan. That type of loan is more governed by government restrictions and details. It's always going to be a first position. Okay. Home equity loans can be, that is the loan that would always be used for the second position if you had a second mortgage or a second loan on your Misconception is they're never used to purchase the home held as collateral, or not a misconception, this is a key difference, sorry. A home equity loan is never used for a purchase, ever. To buy a house, you have to go through the traditional mortgage process. A home equity loan is a loan only ever used it's only ever used when you have equity in a currently owned piece of real estate. Now, I worded it very specifically this way because if I own house number, well, some people, we're not like this, some people, if a person owns house number 1, free and clear, I actually work with people to use a home equity loan on that house to purchase house number 2 or to purchase rental in a lot of cases. Because that was so much lower cost and so much easier and more streamlined than getting traditional mortgage on house number 2. Okay. But what I'm trying to make the point is even when the proceed, that home equity loan bought this other house, it did not buy the house that was collateralizing the loan. If you're going to buy a house with a mortgage on that house, it has to be a traditional mortgage, not a home equity. Okay. The underwriting process. The underwriting process is a basic application. You know, I always used to tell people there's 3 parts of every loan. There's credit, income, and collateral. And that's the process they go through. The application, they do a credit check, they do income verification. They're going to tell you, hey, bring us your pay stubs, bring us your tax returns. They're going to make sure the income works. Then they're going to order an appraisal. Most of the time on a home equity product, they are going to order sometimes again, regulation acceptable, cheaper, easier appraisal. Sometimes those aren't as accurate. But we literally, I mean, there were times where we would send the information to Bob Stewart. Bob Stewart would pull comps in his system, pull the assessment record, pull whatever data he could see, go out, snap one picture of the house and do the appraisal. The house, he would look at the condition of the house. You know, there were cheaper versions of that. Most of the time, the reason the bank would go that route is because they're not, the customer isn't reimbursing them for the appraisal. It's part of the product. Okay? So it's normally pretty streamlined. The customer cost, one thing that was great at US Bank is our home equity loans had 0 closing costs. 0. And that's most times when people are like, all right, what's the And you know, usually along with that, a little different than a traditional mortgage, is there would be a prepayment penalty for 3 years. That's how they recoup their cost. Okay, so the bank eats the appraisal cost, the documentation, all that stuff up front. But if you leave, if you refinance or you pay off this loan in the first 3 years, which on a home equity loan wouldn't be the case, but if you're going to do that, you're going to pay us a fee. Okay. At some banks, the most I ever saw for a cost of a home equity loan was $400, and usually that was to cover the appraisal fee. The U.S. Bank was great in the sense that you could get an appraisal, and you know, if the appraisal didn't work out, if everything fell apart at that point, you weren't out that money. With the traditional mortgage, you are. Okay, if you go to do a refinance or whatever through a traditional mortgage product, nothing happens until you hand them the appraisal fee. And then if that appraisal is insufficient, your money's gone. You paid for a service, that service ultimately demonstrated that the numbers don't work. And it's gone. Okay. The process is generally streamlined. I was thinking as I was preparing this, the fastest home equity loan I ever completed was in 2.5 weeks. Now that was the exception, not the rule, because for that to work, that customer walked in with all the appropriate income verification. It was submitted that day. A credit decision, you know, underwriting wasn't backed up. They made their decision right away. The appraisal got ordered. The appraiser was bored and for some reason didn't have a lot going on. It came through. They processed it in 3 or 4 days, got it back, final review. Most of the time, home equities for the majority of my banking career were done in around a month to maybe 5 weeks. Now, when I left, due to the recession, due to regulation, all this junk, it was getting almost as bad as traditional mortgages. Not as bad, but it was just kind of a pain. Usually your time involved with getting a loan done that is outside of the customer's control is the appraiser. I mean, they may send that order to an appraiser the day the appraiser goes on vacation for 2 days. And now they're just kind of sitting, waiting, you know. A lot of the times, you know, in banking, big surprise, I would run into delays with the customer's delay, you know. They complete the application, hey, I need you to give me your tax return. 2 weeks goes by. And then I get the tax, well, that's 2 weeks, nothing's happened. It's sitting there. Well, now the verification is there. You know what? They're saying they really need to know you have investment income listed on here. I need to get a statement from your financial advisor showing how that was distributed. 2 weeks goes by, you know, whatever the case may be. But as long as you do your part, it can be pretty streamlined, pretty fast.
I've had multiple clients call me and say, I'm at the bank to sign on a home equity loan, and they just told me they have to have my tax return. Or in other words, estimate just heard.
Oh, right, yeah.
And I don't know how they got through the process.
That is probably a small bank. A big bank would never get to that point. A small bank, I can see a small bank kind of saying, well, we know we'll get it. You know, I mean, and to some degree, that's a benefit of working with a small bank. To other degrees, it can be kind of a pain because I've banks at times, and there's a lot of times where we leave at the closing table, and then I'm getting emails saying, "Oh, we need this. Oh, we need that. Oh, you know." And part of that is just the kind of the mom and pop approach as opposed to the corporate approach.
It's always seemed very backwards to me because I've always
Oh,
thought,
yeah.
how did you get to the point of signing?
Yeah.
And you did already.
No, but a U.S. bank, if they're that would never happen. They would never even order the appraisal until income is fully verified. They wouldn't happen. 3-day right of rescission. This is something I think people need to know about. A lot of times people, has anyone ever seen the movie Glengarry Glen Ross? She's got Al Pacino in it. I think I've told you about it. I've become pretty good friends with this friend of mine, and he is a movie guy. And he has this list of his favorite movies, and I spent about a year going through. Well, one of the movies on there was Glengarry Glen Ross. And of course, he liked it because of the way it was conducted, the acting. It was very disturbing for me because it essentially demonstrates individuals. I mean, they're selling real estate. Okay, they're realtors in that movie. But it demonstrates how truly deceptive someone can be if they want to be. I mean, in this movie, they're essentially selling high commission, extremely undesirable real estate in a way. I mean, high risk. I mean, they're not necessarily doing timeshares. They're doing just something that is way out there as far as it takes a lot of salesmanship to try to get someone to take this thing. You know, when that movie, a big chunk of the movie is them trying to manipulate the customer around the 3-day right of rescission. What the 3-day right of rescission is if you do, and I want to speak correctly here, I may throw out a disclaimer. Typically, you do not have a 3-day right of rescission on any type of commercial lending. You do not have a 3-day right of rescission on any type of installment loan or anything other than a piece of real estate. And a lot of times it's a personal piece of real estate. But when you sign a mortgage or you sign a home equity product, within 3 calendar days, you have the right to say never mind. And it just goes away. I mean, it literally, the bank has to halt it, stop it, everything goes away, everything stops, 3 days of signing. Glengarry Glen Ross is very spooky to me, having been in the financial field, because those guys are selling real estate. And there are points in that movie where, like, Al Pacino's character is trying to get his customer, he's purposely withholding the fact that he has a 3-day right of rescission. Those guys' goals is to get this thing sold and then try to dance around the 3-day right of rescission so at 3 days they're done. I mean, even as far as avoiding phone calls, going on trips, doing anything they can so that the customer just almost shies away from really enforcing the thing. Wait a second, this was a bad decision. I need out. I need out of this thing. So, but no, on any type of real estate purchase, from a personal standpoint, again, not necessarily commercial, but if you go to buy a home, whatever type of loan you get, you have a 3-day right of decision on a traditional mortgage or a home equity product. Okay, we're going to decide on that. I think in all my time in banking, I had one customer ever exercise that. And it came down to they were so paranoid that it was too good to be true. No matter how much I said, listen, we can go back over stuff, they came in and shut down. But just know that you have that right. You have that ability to do it. After the 3-day right of rescission, it gets funded. Okay, so you sign papers. 3 days later, if you're paying something off, they send out checks. If they're cutting you a check, it goes into your account. All that happens after that 3-day right of rescission. The terms: a home equity loan is always a fixed term loan. Again, similar to a mortgage. Okay, it could be a 20-year loan. It could be a 15-year loan. It could be a 137-month loan. I mean, whatever you want it to be. It could be a 5-year loan. I think sometimes I could put this on other misconceptions. Sometimes people think, well, it's like a mortgage, it's 30 years. No, you can do a 3-year home equity loan if you want to. Normally, the minimum term is 3 years. And it's a fixed or variable interest rate. Most of the time, in today's financial market, is going to be fixed. I see no reason, as I stated before, to ever have a variable interest rate on home equity. I've ever seen the reason. And that, again, is another benefit of corporate banks, big banks. A lot of times, small banks like Union Savings and Loan, FCN, these type of products, they will want to do an ARM, which does anyone remember what that stands for? ARM, adjustable rate mortgage, meaning you have a fixed interest rate for a specific period of time, but after that, it can adjust every year based on the current interest rate. Especially in right now, you want things fixed because one of Trump's goals, which as far as economy is concerned, the interest rate does need to go up. But if you are getting a loan on anything right now, you want it fixed because the rates will go up. I mean, that's going to happen to me with commercial property. You cannot get, unfortunately, a 20 or 30-year fixed commercial loan. You get a 5-year loan that then renews at the current interest rate environment. Okay? But
What is that rate approximately?
on what? On like home loans right now? On a traditional mortgage, well, that changes day to day. I mean, I ran into, well, it was actually a funeral, but I talked to David Edwards the other day, and I mean, just literally since the election 10 days earlier, interest rates on home mortgages have jumped 75 basis points, 1.75%. Right now, if you bought a home, you should be in the low 4 range. Something like that. Okay, high 3 range. If you did a home equity loan right now, there's a lot of factors there based on the loan to value you're at, your credit, all that stuff. But on a home equity loan, you're probably going to be in the 5 range. Yeah, I don't want to talk about it. Commercial lending, I mean, most of my stuff is in the 4 range, 5 range. Yep.
Ironically, right, just a few minutes before you made that comment, I was thinking, I honestly wasn't sure what Trump's position was on that. But the interest rate has to go up to help the economy.
Yeah, it has to go up.
What a lot of people don't realize is there are a whole lot of nonprofits going under because of the low interest rate. The Boys Club here in Connersville
Right.
was set up to operate off the interest rate off of the fund that was set up for it. Back when interest rates were high.
Right.
Interest dropped below and it eventually killed it, and that's happening to other places
Right.
too. So a lot of people aren't realizing that, but that's where some of those types of places don't have the funding they need
Right.
because they were set up assuming 5, 6, some of them higher interest rates.
Any type of endowment. I mean,
Exactly.
our Fayette County Foundation,
Right.
people go to that foundation and say, I want to give $2 million to be used towards the community's parks. Well, the purpose of that foundation is to maintain the principal while spending the money off of the return. Well, guess what? 8 to 10% return is very different than 2 to 3% return. I mean, that makes a massive difference, and that's what Mom's talking about is you know, I don't know the details of how the Boys and Girls Club was run, but optimally, it would have been set up with an endowment in the beginning where the day-to-day functions could be paid from the interest. Well, if that interest isn't sufficient, that's when they have to start utilizing the principal and the endowment starts going away. What starts happening. So yeah, part of, I won't get into, you know, massive economics or, you know, macroeconomics, but yeah, there has to be, I mean, when the economy is good, the interest rate is higher. That's the way it's functioning. For an individual utilizing loans, it's not as attractive, but it's part of what it is. Okay. So I guess what I'm saying, in today's environment, as of the time of me giving this class, if you have the option to fix something, a fixed interest rate, you want to do it. And most home equity loans you find will be fixed, but there can be variable options out there. Benefits, okay? Fixed interest rate option to refinance revolving debt. That is why we did tons and tons and tons of home equity loans. When I finally got through to that individual that had $50,000 of equity in their house and $40,000 of credit card debt, that they were paying 30% on their credit cards, but they could pay 4% by moving it over. I always use the debt in the pants analogy. I said, listen, you're wearing pants, okay? The debt is in your pants. All I'm proposing is take it out of this stupid pocket and move it over here. The debt is still in your pants. You're not adding debt. You're just shifting it to a different one. Because again, I dealt quite often with people like, well, I don't want to put a loan on my house. And it's like, you have $40,000 of credit card debt. It's about the management of your debt. It has nothing. I'm not proposing adding. I'm proposing moving so that it's way more effective in how you pay it down, how you deal with it. This is a really attractive option, which I'll deal with later. Okay. No harm, no foul underwriting process in contrast to initial cost of mortgage. Again, if you do a traditional mortgage, nothing happens till you are handing them a appraisal fee. Sometimes traditional mortgage companies could require an application fee, could require an initiation fee. I mean, most of the time that doesn't get over $500 to $1,000, but that's $500 to $1,000. On your home equity loan, most of the time the process moves along, and if it ultimately simply doesn't work because of the appraisal or at whatever step, you're out nothing. Okay, in most cases. Even banks that require the closing fee normally do not require it up front as an appraisal fee. Okay? Most of the time it is only a fee if we sit down and close the loan. But if they order the appraisal is, you know, for whatever reason, doesn't justify the loan most of the time, it's no harm, no foul. Okay? Cash out options for the purchase of various things. This is an extremely effective product for someone who chooses to do home renovations or something, you know, and needs to borrow. Okay? That kind of deals with you as an individual determining what is, you know, being a good steward. You know, I wouldn't, it's up to you. I guess I wouldn't necessarily propose putting on a $50,000 renovation if you don't need it or have to have it. But I'm saying if you're going to do that, if you need to take out lending for something on the home, this is a phenomenal option to do that. Okay. Vehicles. I've had people come to me before and they want to take the stewardly approach to buying a vehicle. They're like, Matt, I found this perfect car. It's 10 years old, low miles. It's great. You know, I need to buy it. Well, you can't do an home loan. Banks don't want collateral that's older than 7 years. So a lot of times the person was stuck unless they did a cash advance on a credit card, which was dumb because that's going to be at 15%. You know, I mean, they're ruining the point of the low cost approach to driving. This is a phenomenal option for that. Let's do a 3-year home equity loan, 4 or 5%. You know, I mean, again, it's collateralized by the equity. It's not collateralized by the vehicle. So you can buy whatever you want. You can buy a vehicle. You can, you know, I joke with people. I'd say you can go to Vegas if you want. I mean, we don't care. It's collateralized by this piece of real estate, but we're giving cash out for whatever reason. Or debt consolidation is really where it's just a phenomenal one we did. Like I said, I think our average year trying to remember now. I think our average year in home equity was usually around $1 million. In 2010, I think we did about 5 million. I know 5 to 10 million in home equity loan. I mean, we doubled our portfolio. We had about 80% growth in 1 year, and most of it was this, and it was phenomenal. I mean, it was, like I said, it was always funny because I would get on phone calls with my peers, and corporate banking is a sales industry. I mean, it has got that kind of sales. But we would talk about closing percentages, and it was just funny to me because I have been in an emotional sale industry. Okay, car buying is an emotional sale because it doesn't make sense in most cases. Okay, new car, there's no logical reason to buy a new car. Logical compared to the other options. To me, the financial realm was all logical. It's all, you had to like numbers. And I would tell people, I'm like, what do you mean like closing percentage? It's 100%. I wouldn't do the application in the first place if the customer and I looked at the numbers and the numbers didn't make sense. If the numbers made sense, we did. There was no sales process. It was me demonstrating the numbers and an obvious decision whether to proceed or whether to not proceed. Okay? And a lot of times in debt consolidation, it's a very effective tool, and the numbers spoke for themselves, which I'll look at later. Okay, that's home equity loans. Home equity lines of credit have the same underwriting process, same streamline, appraisal, no cost typically, the same LTV stipulations, but a line of credit is a line of credit. We talked about that, okay? For all intents and purposes, think of it like a credit card. It is on-demand money, but it is using the equity in the home as collateral. The terms. Here's the way this works. When a home equity line of credit is set up, it is still shelled in the design of a mortgage, of a mortgage-style loan. So you typically have 10 to 15 years that you can revolve that line of credit. Either you can take money out, put it back, put money out, put it back, put money out, put it back. If at the end of that time period, usually stipulated by the bank, if you have a balance, because it is within the shell rules of a mortgage, it has to be gone, usually in a 30-year period. So at the end of that revolving period, if you have a balance, the customer will get a notice in the mail saying, hey, you don't have a line of credit anymore. You have an installment loan. Here's your payment. It'll be paid off at this time. Okay? 0.1% of customers actually run into this because normally they end up changing something in that 10 to 15 year period. If they change it, if they refinance it, if they increase it, if they decrease it, if they close it, whatever happens, that starts the time clock over. Line of credit, like most line of credits, has a variable interest rate. Variable means what? It means a margin on prime. A margin on prime. Does anyone remember what the prime interest rate is? I think I actually misstated this a couple months ago because prime has ticked up once, which is a big deal because prime has sat steady for upwards of 8 years at 3.25%. It is now 3.5%. Okay. So usually your interest rate is prime plus something that is determined by the loan to value, determined by your debt to income, determined by the size of the line, determined if that line of credit is in the second position or if it's the first position. Okay? If your home is paid off and you go in and get a $100,000 home equity line of credit with no other mortgages, you're probably going to have sometimes prime plus 0, which means your interest rate on this line of credit is 3.5%. That is pretty attractive compared to a credit card, which is usually prime plus 12, or prime plus 15, or prime plus 24. Okay, big difference, and the difference is the collateral. Now, if I had a customer come in and got a $20,000 line of credit in the second position after a mortgage, normally they were like prime plus 4. That's still pretty pretty attractive compared to any other line of credit you can get. Even, we had a line of credit at the bank called a Premier line. It took a very strong credit to get, but it was still unsecured. It was prime plus 10. So I mean, that gives you an idea. Even an elite line of credit for a very qualified individual that is still unsecured is still leaps and bounds above this. The minimum payment, this is another big deal about home equity lines of credit. Does anyone remember what your minimum payment usually is on a credit card? Most of the time it is 2% of the balance plus the interest on the balance. Okay? So if it's $1,000, right off the bat, your minimum payment is going to be 20, and then they're going to calculate your interest rate to that $1,000 for the month, and that is your minimum payment. Okay? On a home equity line of credit, you usually have 3 options. You can do interest only, which I never, ever, ever recommended or allowed a customer to do, but I did it myself, and that's for a different reason. But you can do interest only, which I never recommended, largely because people's discipline. Okay? Interest only literally means your monthly bill is the interest. If you pay that bill only, your principal will not drop at all. Or you could do 1% of the balance solid, not 1% plus interest, just 1%. And 1% normally, because the interest rate is so low, would knock off the interest payment and part of the principal. Or you could do 2%, which I never really recommended. That's one of the benefits of this product, is a lower minimum payment than a credit card or than a business line of credit. You know, business lines of credit can be 2.5%, 3% of the balance. And you normally have tiered pricing. I kind of explained that. If you get a $20,000 line of credit, you may have a slightly higher rate than if you get a $50,000 line of credit, which may have a slightly higher rate than if you got a $100,000 line of credit. It's tiered based on again, largely dealing with the risk to the bank. Okay? Do you have a question?
I'm confused about what a home equity line of credit is. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
I understand the home equity line.
Perfect timing.
Okay.
I can't find illustrations that explain it as well as I can, so I make my own. I did this for every single customer I ever worked with at the bank to explain this, okay? Ultimately, we're going to appraise the home. That is what your home is worth. Okay, let's say it's $150,000. If your first mortgage is locked in at $67,409, what a home equity line of credit does is we're going to go up to, say, 90% of the value of your home. That's where we're going to draw the line, because the bank wants some protection. You may destroy the house and knock this thing down to 135 because of your negligence or whatever. So that's where we're going to draw the line. Okay? If 90% is 135,000, a home equity line of credit, I always literally drew it like this. I always said it opens a door to your equity. Right now, if any of you guys have equity in your home and do not have a home equity line of credit, you cannot access that equity other than by doing what? Selling a house. That is the only way you get to hold your equity in your hand. Okay? A home equity line of credit is a tool that gives you access to that equity as an on-demand loan or a line of credit. So in this situation, if this is the mortgage, if we draw the line at 90%, we can do a home equity line of credit for $67,591. When the customer signs and leaves, they don't have a loan for this. Just, again, try to compare it in your head. A lot of people are more familiar with credit cards. If you have a $10,000 credit card with no balance, you don't have a loan for that. I mean, if you pass away, that's not a debt that's there or anything like that. Same thing here. But this person walks out the door with a $67,500 credit card or line of credit that is secured by the home. It is only debt if you use it. It's only debt if you use it. That person can come in the next day and borrow 50. I mean, literally, tell the teller, put 50 grand in my checking account. Okay. They can come in the next day and pay it off. And come in the next day and borrow 20. And come in the next day and pay it off. I mean, this is one of the greatest financial products, in my opinion, that exists as far as the management of debt and the management of expenses. You know, my opinion, if someone can have one of these, have a dime in a savings account right now, because savings accounts stink. If that individual is more comfortable investing that money in some fashion, they should have their money in an investment account. And I'll get to this, one of the drawbacks of having your money invested in some financial product in the market is liquidity. You can't get to it normally for upwards of a week. If you call your Edward Jones guy and say, hey, my furnace just went out. I need to pay this dude $3,000 right now. Well, I'll process the withdrawal, but it's going to be 3 to 5 business days before I can get to it. It can. Yeah, I don't even go into that. You're right. But if that individual has one of these, it's a phenomenal tool. Bam, here's your $3,000, Mr. HVAC guy. I get the money 5 days later out of the investment I paid off. You know, it's very flexible tool. It is a credit card, but all the bad things of a credit card gone, and everything good about a credit card that we went over, Renee.
And you don't have to put it off, you just like pay that in a month less interest.
Yeah, as far as what you have to pay,
Right.
that's up to you. Yeah.
And would you say then, unfortunately, I don't have this problem. Would you say then, okay, the guy's got he's got that, and he's got $10,000 set savings account. He'd be better off investing, paying on his own and creating $10,000 more worth of equity in his home and having it available there.
That's an extremely good comment. The answer is only if he can get this product.
Yeah.
Because you just hit on something I want to address at a later time about using your house as a savings account. And there's a lot of reasons why that's not smart. Of course, the American dream is pay off my home and have the deed in hand. Okay? But just for reasons I've even mentioned today, there's only one way to get to that equity other than this, and that's to sell your house. So for the person, I was just reading an article on that in the last couple of days. That person that, I'll use this example right now, my stepmom. My stepmom is going to get a small life insurance policy. The very first thought in her head and in my dad's head was pay it towards the house. Well, if a $60,000 mortgage becomes a $10,000 mortgage, guess what happens to the payment? It doesn't change. Okay? In her case, the month to month is more important. And I actually proposed to her, I said, a lot of people think pay down the debt. Instead, as an option, you could take that life insurance and generate a $600 check to you every month for the next 10 years. Now, your life may change in the next 10 years. Her kids will be done with college. She may be farther along in her job. She may have more income, whatever the case may be. Okay. Yes, there's interest on that mortgage, but in her case, I recommend cash flow, making sure you can pay the bills. If you got $50,000 in equity and can't afford the payment, that's not going to help anything at all. So I guess to answer your question, yes, if someone can get this, I think there is wisdom to that, because a savings account on $67,000 would be paying 0.05%. Down on a mortgage, they could be saving 4%. And that's always the great balance of money. That's always the great question is where is it the most effective? Why, I can't remember if I've talked about this already, the idea of liquidating an investment account, earning 6 to 8, and paying debt. Yeah, we talked about that, didn't we? And paying down a mortgage that you're paying 4 on is ridiculous. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. It's always where is the greater return. So yes, if that individual can get this, yes. However, if that individual can't get this, the next best thing is an emergency fund sitting in a checking account or savings. But Grandma, to answer your question, so a home equity line of credit it makes this available. If this was a home equity loan, the person would walk away from closing with that amount of money and begin making payments. That's the difference in the two. It still uses equity on the house as a loan. But see, let me give another example here. I had a customer one time up at Chase Bank that I recommended this. His home was paid off. I said, you need to get a home equity line of credit. Just to have, he was older, he was responsible, it wasn't going to be a temptation to him, because that's a big deal here too. Okay? Always be thinking of that. All this stuff has to have responsibility. If you're going to be undisciplined with it, don't get it. Anytime a line of credit. But I told this guy, I'm like, you just need to get it, because you just don't know. Well, I'm good. Why would I ever need that? That guy walking into the bank. My son owns his own business. He has a serious issue. He has a tax bill that's due. I want to be able to give him $20,000. He's going to pay me back in 3 months. And I said, how are we going to do that? All of your net worth is in equity in your home. There's no way to get that unless you sell your home. And I remember that because it's like, man, if you would have had a line of credit, I would have handed you 20 grand right now. No question. I mean, it's yours. It's on demand.
Well,
But he couldn't do
the
that.
example that I can use with that, my mom got stuck in a situation for the first time when they got Chuck's hearing aids.
Mhm.
She didn't realize that they put her on a credit card. We got to talking about it, and she had 24% interest.
Yep.
I said, Mom, I said, no. I said, we're paying this off. I had a line of pension, I had a line of credit of just like this. Well, yeah, it was about that, but 4%. So we took that, put it over
Bam.
there, and
Yep.
then Mom paid me every month
Yep.
until we got it paid off. It was,
Yep.
yeah, so.
It is the cheapest on-demand money you can find. I mean, seriously, you cannot find on-demand money. Now, you can get auto loans for 2.99% or whatever, but I'm saying money when needed is no cheaper than this product. Yeah, whatever you want to use. As a real estate investor, that is the dream. I mean, I'm serious. There is nothing better than literally a home equity line of credit. I can get lines of credit like this on commercial real estate, but the rates will be high. And there'll be worse stipulations. They'll want to review it. But a home equity line of credit is fantastic because you can use it for whatever flexibility you want to use. Again, disclaimer, anytime line of credit is involved, there has to be self-discipline. Okay? If you pull out 20 grand to buy a boat that you don't need to have, I'm not recommending that. Okay? And again, that's where guys like Dave Ramsey and others take the path of caution and just tell people don't have it. But what I'm trying to present in this class is the effective use of the tool if you're self-disciplined. Okay.
Okay, say you had first and second, first is paid off, and first, and you have your line of credit.
Well,
First is paid off. When you got your line of credit, then it wasn't as much because you still had this
Right.
loan.
Mhm.
Can you go back and revisit and they
Yep.
up their credit now because you have the first?
you can, but it's an underwriting process. They're going to redo it at that time. So I think what Bernadine's asking is, at the moment this is done, the mortgage is 67. What about when that's paid down to 20? Can you move the line? Can you move the line here? Can you make it bigger?
Because it would be worth.
And the answer is absolutely. It's just it would be an underwriting process at that time. They would relook at credit. They would relook at income. They would relook at the appraisal of the property. But a lot of times that's very intelligent to do because, again, a $67,000 line of credit may be in one price point. A $75,000 line may have less interest. So it's worth looking at, especially since you're talking about a product that now lines of credit, I didn't hit this. Usually you have an option to get a line of credit with 0 annual fee or an annual fee with a lower interest rate. And a lot of times that's very simple math that I would do with a customer. Okay, you're gonna have a $90 annual fee, but you're anticipating having this balance for years. We're using it to pay down debt. It's going to save you, $300 a year in the interest drop that you pay with the annual. I mean, that's just common sense. Okay, same thing with credit cards. I've had credit cards with a $50 annual fee, but I use that credit card because instead of $1,000 of rewards a year, I get $1,500. Okay, we just need to think through that. Okay. But yes, to answer your question is that line is all going to be based on the amount of equity you have. If this isn't here, this individual can have $34,000 line. This is how I would try to demonstrate it, that prior to them coming in, this is all they had. And from here to here was all equity. It was inaccessible. And then here's where the home equity line of credit comes
Okay, question.
Yep.
With a home equity
in. Loan.
loan, you would have your house paid off. Probably. I mean,
You can,
You
yeah.
would take a loan out for renovations or buy another property or for debt consolidation.
Yep.
But with a home equity loan, it's basically use it like a credit card.
Line
you
of credit,
need.
yep.
Okay.
Yep.
But if you don't have a mortgage, then you get a line of credit.
Yep, and that's what I'm showing here. This person has a first mortgage already on their house. And because they have sufficient equity, they can get a home equity line of credit. Same way with the home equity loan. In fact, what I did a lot of times during the recession is the customer would come in and I would refinance this traditional mortgage into a home equity loan. Because keep in mind, their rate was locked from, say, 2005, when rates were way higher. So we would refinance this into a home equity loan for free, and then I would open a line of credit after that. So they would leave with a lower interest rate loan that they paid nothing for, hence the too good to be true, and a line of credit, and an appraisal that they got for free, which appraisal is always good, you know. So yes, as long as the equity is there, these products are available. But that's the hard part, is you start a 30-year loan on a house, it takes a while. But a lot of times people who have been there or people who got a good deal, I wanted to kick Jeremy Wilson in the teeth when he called me and told me, he's like, because he's been interested in rentals, and he's like, hey, the bank talked to me about, he wouldn't mind me telling this. He's like, the bank talked to me about a home equity line of credit. Would that be good? And I'm like, well, yeah, it'd be great for buying rentals and dealing with rentals, but there's no way you can get one. You just got your house 3 years ago. He's like, well, they processed it already, and they gave me a $70,000 line of credit. And I'm like, what? What are you silly? They bought their house for like $60,000 and put significant repairs into it, and it appraised for like 190. So good for them, But he has this line of credit that, again, for managing rentals or real estate or business. It's great if a business owner could get one of these. I'd say, yeah, get one. It's better than any unsecured business line of credit imaginable. It's fantastic. Okay, of course, we're going far longer than I intended to do. We'll try to finish up here. Benefits, on-demand loan. It's cheapest money out there, which I have next. Flexibility in financial situations, investment liquidation. That's the example I used, okay? If you need money, if you have the investments invested in some capacity, it gives you flexibility. Okay, forget the example I just gave about the 3 to 5 days. Let's say your furnace goes out on election day and the market drops 5%. And it's very likely that's going to be an outrageously temporary drop. Not a good time to liquidate your investments. I'm not saying time the market, but I'm saying sometimes you can notice those flows where, man, for this week, the market's down for whatever reason. We bomb someone in the Middle East or whatever. I may hang out for a little bit and leave it on my home equity line of credit and then liquidate my investment. Again, consult a financial advisor, but I'm saying it gives you that flexibility to have something like this. Down payments. I've had someone, like I said, the property, I had one guy that had a house and the land came available next to him. The land is very unforgiving when it comes to financials, which I've never understood because it's fantastic collateral. But usually you're not getting a traditional mortgage on that land. If you're getting a loan on that land, you need to put a significant amount down, maybe 20%. We did a home equity line of credit on the guy's house. He bought the land adjacent to him. At that point, he structured the deed to where that land increased the value of his home. And we circled back at a later time and kind of did what you said. He was able to, it was great for buying his dream land right next to his house. Business, it'd be great for business if you wanted to use it for cash flow. Low payment obligation compared to other tools. We hit on that. Credit cards are 2%. I have a business line of credit. It's 2.5%. I've seen some of them more than 3 to 5%. Mortgage exemption on taxes. That's one of my favorite ones. Okay, person comes in with their home paid off. They're not getting a mortgage exemption on their taxes. Okay, you get a portion off of your property taxes for having a mortgage on your house. If you do a home equity line of credit, most of the time, the local assessor is fine just with the paperwork on that line of credit, whether you have a balance or not. If you have to, even by the rules, normally you can pull out $1,000 for 1 month and put it back and get a mortgage exemption on your taxes. Because that's what it is. It is a mortgage obligation on your, recorded at the courthouse, but it's only debt. It's only debt if if you sell the house, the only obligation to pay off is what you have borrowed at the time. So that's another benefit, because it's got tax benefits to it. A lock option. Another cool thing about lines of credit is it's kind of the best of both worlds. Most lines of credit have a feature where if you pull out, like I had a guy one time, they had a home equity line of credit. He and his wife wanted to buy a vehicle each, and they were very frugal. Like they wanted a $3,000 vehicle each, and they wanted to track. They kind of did the split thing. Each of them wanted to pay down their loan. Home equity line of credit was perfect for that. We pulled out the total amount of money. They went and bought their cars, and then our home equity line of credit had a feature where you could take a balance and lock it in to a fixed interest rate on a term loan inside the line of credit. So what they ended up with, they each had their $3,500 3-year loan at a fixed percent interest rate, and they made their payments. And they literally tracked. They came in, they're like, all right, now where's our balances at? And it was great because their bill literally showed home equity line balance, $7,000. Lock 1, $3,500. Lock 2, $3,500. So it was the best. It was the best of both worlds. They had the availability of the line of credit, but they had a fixed interest rate. If the interest rate of the line of credit was skyrocketed, that lock was there. And a lot of times we have people do that in a bigger option, like on home renovations or whatever. You can have multiple locks. As the lock pays down, it reopens the line of credit. So as they paid off that $7,000, it made available.
But once you lock, you've locked the term in.
You have locked the term in, yeah. Well, you can actually bust open the lock if you want to. Well, sometimes that has a fee. That actually, if a customer locks in a balance, if for whatever reason, like a lot of times, let's say they did a home renovation for $10,000 one year, wanted to lock it in, well then they do $5,000 6 months later. Well, now they have a lock, the 10, and then 5,000 floating, and they say, can we just kind of turn it? We want to pay it all off in 5 years. Okay, let's break this open and put the 15,000 in its own thing for 5 years. A lot of times it would give people a little more structure, because again, the minimum payments is all you're going to be billed for. If you pay 1% of the balance forever, it's going to take you 18 years to pay that off, even if you pay that consistent from that day. If 1% on day one is $180 and you pay $180 from then on out, it's going to take you 18, 20 years. If they instead said, we love the line of credit, but we want this balance paid off in 5 years, the lock was perfect for that because it turned it into its own little installment. Lock is great for short-term balances. If people would consolidate debt, or if people would buy an old car that they wanted to pay off, or whatever. A family member passed away, and to settle up the estate, they needed to actually put into the estate $4,000 to pay off relatives or something. There's so many of those things. It's just, there has to be self-discipline there, but it is a very, very nice financial product. And again, like that guy with his son with the business, it can't be got quickly. It takes an underwriting process of a month. So I always recommend it's the kind of thing that you get when you don't need it. Because when you need it, a lot of times you can't get it. I had customers at times that over the course of 6 years, I watched them. At one point in time, their financial life was great. And guess what? I was in banking during the recession. And then job wavered, income wavered. They could have used a tool like this to be flexible. Well, then when they came in and said, all right, I'm ready to apply, well, you have the equity, but you don't have the income to justify it. You don't have your credit has faltered because you haven't been able to make payments. You can't get one. And it was, you know, it's something you get when you don't need it. That way, when you do need it, it's there. Any other questions? My plan next time is to spend a class on credit reports. Talk about how credit reports, what affects credit scores. I think a lot of people are unfamiliar with those things. And that includes sometimes people who are running your credit. I mean, your credit can be damaged very heavily by people without you even really realizing it. And again, just being aware of those things. If there's no other comments, I'll close out prayer and then we'll be dismissed. Let's go. Pray God of heaven, Lord, we thank you so much for another day. Lord, we thank you again for the ability to reason and to think. Lord, I thank you that I've had just some interesting experience in these areas, and I pray, Lord, that this resource might be helpful to those participating or maybe to those linked to us. Lord, I just pray that as Christians we can always be a resource of everything that is good, and a source of wisdom that comes from you, and Lord, that we can be good stewards of the grace that you have given, and we can encourage others to do the same. Lord, thank you for the blessings that you give. We pray we might always use those effectively for the gospel and for the spreading of Jesus Christ. Lord, we just pray that we can use these resources to demonstrate love to others and to glorify you. This is in Jesus' name.
Hi, birthday girl.
Yeah. Whatever. And I'm.
It's all right.
Where did you that?
2 days. I've been here in college.
Okay, yeah, then we can. I'll have another 30 seconds.
Thank you.
So there's a lot of cabinets and stuff you can buy too, of course, that would be purchasing the storage, but they're really nice storage. There's just, you get a lot in a small space if it's looking like. They're going to the, I'm just gonna have the girls so they can do that. And so, I'm getting them a couple hours before that. About 6, and I'm gonna go get about. No, I'm gonna go get them. They don't need to leave to be in town till like 6:30. And then the movie's only be a short time, so I said I'd just get it before. But if you don't mind, I'll look for a little bit. I need to run 1 or 2 errands too, so they no, Ellie took London.
You must make.
Hey, Matthew, the screen's still up over here.
It has been like in my.
Are we still on the 22 camera?